Lamont Saint hated funerals. He stood there, adjusting his raven wing-colored tie, and looked at the closed coffin, buried in wreaths. Under the high arches of the church, soft music played, mingling with the muffled sobs of relatives. Nzinga Oluba, a distant relative whom Lamont had hardly remembered in recent years. A strange old man who occasionally appeared at family gatherings, sat in a corner, and watched everyone with a half-smile, as if he knew some secret. Now that secret would go with him to the grave. "Are you okay?" Imani put her hand on her husband's shoulder. Her touch was light but confident. Lamont nodded without looking at his wife. 25 years of marriage was a long time. Sometimes he felt like he knew every line on her face, every curve of her body. Tall, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed too big for her narrow face. Beautiful, despite her age, or because of it. "Just thinking," Lamont replied. "It's strange to see everyone together. How many years has it been?" "A lot," Imani said, adjusting her immaculate hairstyle. "Come on, your cousin Shanti wants to talk." Lamont's family was large and sprawling. He hadn't seen many of his relatives in years, and some he didn't recognize at all. Their faces merged into a mass of sympathetic smiles and hushed voices. After the ceremony, everyone moved to the Nzinga house, an old mansion on the outskirts of Evanston. Lamont remembered how, as children, he and his brother had considered this place enchanted, full of mysteries and secrets. Amir. The thought of his younger brother struck him with unexpected pain. 30 years had passed since he disappeared after a quarrel with their father. He had left in the night, slamming the door behind him, and vanished without a trace. Sometimes Lamont thought he saw his features in random passers-by, but it was just his imagination. "Mr. Saint?" An elderly man in a formal suit approached him. "I am Ezekiel Tembo, Mr. Oluwa's attorney. May I speak with you privately?" Lamont followed the lawyer into a small office. The walls were covered with photographs. Lamont recognized many of them as members of his family, cousins, uncles, and aunts. In some, it was him, young and smiling, and Amir was next to him. "Mr. Oluba left this for you." Ezekiel Tembo handed him an envelope. "He insisted that I deliver it personally after the funeral." The envelope was sealed with old-fashioned embossed wax. Lamont turned it over in his hands. "Did he say anything? Explain what's in here?" "No, sir. He just said it was very important and that he should have told you earlier." When the attorney left, Lamont sank into a chair by the window. It was getting dark outside, and he could see his reflection, the tired face of a successful man who had achieved everything he wanted, or almost everything. He broke the wax seal and took out the letter. The handwriting was uneven, the letters jumping around, betraying the writer's trembling hand. "Dear Lamont, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I will take many secrets with me, but there is one that I have no right to take. You deserve to know the truth." Lamont read, and the world around him turned upside down. The words formed sentences, the sentences formed paragraphs, the paragraphs formed a story that couldn't be true. But Nzinga described details he couldn't have known. He wrote about how he had helped Amir hide 30 years ago, how he had given him money to get started, how he supported his decision to change gender, how he accidentally found out that Imani, whom Lamont had married, was his brother Amir, who had changed his appearance and personality. I don't know why he did it. Maybe he wanted to be closer to the only person who was family to him. Maybe it was revenge for you not protecting him from his father. Or maybe it was a form of love, twisted, but sincere. I'm sorry for telling you this now. I've kept quiet all these years, but in the face of death, I realized I couldn't take this secret with me. Lamont reread the letter 3 times. Then he crumpled it up and put it in his pocket. It couldn't be true. The old man had lost his mind and come up with a sick fantasy. He went out into the hall, where relatives were still gathering, and saw Imani talking to her cousin Shanti. He looked at his wife with new eyes. He searched her features for signs of Amir, the boy with whom they had caught frogs in the pond and built tree houses. No, impossible. He knew Imani's body like his own. They had made love 1,000 times. They had 2 children. Imani caught his gaze and frowned slightly. He tried to smile, but it came out strained. "I have to get back to the office," Lamont said, approaching his wife. "An urgent call from a client." "On the day of the funeral?" Imani raised an eyebrow. That gesture, so familiar, now seemed artificial. "Lawyers don't get to choose." He kissed her on the cheek and left, feeling her gaze on his back. Instead of the office, Lamont drove to the Evanston Public Library. He sat down at a computer and began searching for information. Medical procedures for gender reassignment 30 years ago. Documents for changing one's identity. He methodically gathered information, as he always did when preparing for a difficult court case. At the law firm he had built from scratch, Lamont was known for his meticulousness. He immersed himself in details, found inconsistencies, and constructed flawless arguments. Now those skills were useful for a completely different investigation. For 2 days, he was hardly home, citing work. Imani called, her voice sounding concerned, but he answered curtly, saying he was busy. He avoided her, afraid of giving himself away. On the 3rd day, Lamont went to a clinic in Chicago. 30 years ago, according to Nzingi, Amir began his transformation. The clinic had long since closed, but Lamont found the former administrator, an elderly woman named Joyce Mutombo. "We don't keep records that old," she said, adjusting her glasses. "And even if we did, I couldn't show them to you without a court order." Lamont placed an envelope on the table. Joyce looked at the amount and shook her head, but did not return the money. "All I can say is that I remember that young man. He was scared, but determined. Some patients have doubts, they waver. He never did." "And what happened next?" "Surgery, hormone therapy. Things weren't as advanced then as they are now, but the results could already be impressive. Impressive enough to deceive a relative? A loved one?" Joyce shrugged. "With a good plastic surgeon and acting skills, yes, possibly." Lamont found that surgeon. Dr. Levy, now an old man in his 80s, lived in a nursing home on the northern outskirts of town. He didn't remember any specific patient. He had performed hundreds of operations during his career. But when Lamont showed him an old photo of Amir, he stared at the young man's features for a long time. "He had potential," the doctor finally said. "Delicate features, the right physique. I can't say for sure, but yes, with the right approach, the transformation could have been very successful." The last item in Lamont's investigation was Imani's medical records. His wife had recently undergone a checkup. It wasn't easy to get access to this information, but Lamont had connections in various fields. He read the report in his car, parked by Lake Michigan. The wind drove the waves toward the shore, the gray sky blending with the gray water. Medical terms, tests, doctors' conclusions. And among all this, a small note about surgical reconstruction many years ago, and hormonal characteristics, which the doctor attributed to long-term replacement therapy after early menopause. Lamont looked at the water, and inside he felt just as gray and cold. 25 years of marriage, 2 children who had obviously been adopted so early that they didn't remember it, thousands of shared breakfasts, dinners, vacations, arguments, and reconciliations. He remembered their first meeting, supposedly accidental, in a bookstore. Imani had talked so enthusiastically about her favorite book, a book that Amir had read voraciously as a child. All this time, all these years, his brother had lived next to him, shared his bed, raised children with him, and laughed at him behind his back? Or did he really love him? How can you love someone when you've built a relationship on such a lie? Lamont slammed his hands on the steering wheel, then again, and again, until his knuckles began to bleed. Only then did he stop. He took out his phone and dialed a number. "Barakat? It's Lamont. I need your help. Yes, legal help. I've discovered something in my family affairs. He spoke in an even, calm voice, as if in important negotiations. Only his eyes were empty and cold, like a winter lake. Lamont returned home in the evening. The Victorian-style mansion, purchased 10 years ago when his firm began to generate significant income, greeted him with its usual warmth and comfort. The hallway smelled of dinner and freshly cut flowers. These smells used to calm Lamont after a stressful day at work. Now they seemed part of a monstrous backdrop. He hung his coat on a hanger and walked into the living room. Imani was sitting in an armchair with a tablet, looking at something for her work. She had become a stylist after getting married, having previously changed several professions without staying in any of them for long. Lamont had previously attributed this to her creative nature. Now he understood that his wife was simply avoiding long-term relationships that could lead to her being exposed. Finally, Imani looked up and smiled. The kids were already asking if you were coming home for dinner. Lamont looked closely at her face. Now that he knew the truth, he thought he could see masculine features hidden beneath her flawless makeup. Her jawline was slightly sharper than a woman's. She always hid her Adam's apple under scarves or collars. Her hand movements were precise and economical, without the unnecessary gracefulness of a woman. "Is Javan home?" he asked, walking over to the bar and pouring himself a whiskey. "Yes, he came home from college for the weekend. Nala is here too. It's a rare occasion when we're all together." Lamont nodded, hiding his face behind his glass. His children, who were not his biological children, adopted secretly with fake birth certificates. How was this possible? Nzinga had mentioned connections in certain circles, money that opened many doors. But still, the scale of the deception seemed unbelievable. Dinner was served in the dining room, at a large oak table. Javan, a tall, athletic young man, talked about his studies. Nala, who had inherited her mother's sharp cheekbones and expressive eyes, added comments about her life in college. It was a normal family dinner, except that one of the participants knew that it was all a lie. Lamont hardly participated in the conversation. He watched Imani, noticing details he hadn't noticed before or hadn't paid attention to. Her hands were larger than most women's. She sat with her legs spread wider than was customary for ladies, although she always caught herself and corrected her posture. Her voice was melodious, but with a certain hoarseness that Lamont had always found sexy. Now that hoarseness sounded like proof of deception. "Dad, you seem strange today," Nala interrupted his thoughts. "Did something happen?" "Nothing," Lamont forced himself to smile. "Just a difficult case at work." "Another millionaire getting divorced?" Javan smirked. "Or did someone violate the terms of $1 million contract?" "Something more personal," Lamont looked directly at Imani. "A case of secret identity, when a person lives under someone else's mask for so long that they may have come to believe in it themselves." Imani tensed, her hand with the fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "Sounds interesting," she said after a pause. "Tell me more?" "I'm not sure the kids should hear such dirty details," Lamont replied, without looking away. "Maybe we can discuss it later. Alone." After dinner, the children went to their rooms. Javan was going to meet up with friends, and Nala was going to finish her college essay. Imani began to clear the table, but Lamont stopped her. "Leave it," he said. "We need to talk." They moved to Lamont's study. Here he felt more confident, surrounded by law books, diplomas on the walls, and expensive furniture, symbols of his success. Success that he had built himself without deception. "What's going on, Lamont?" Imani sat down on the edge of the leather sofa. "You haven't been yourself since the funeral. Did you know that Nzinga left me a letter?" Lamont took a crumpled envelope out of his desk drawer. He had put it there on purpose before dinner. Imani paled slightly. "What letter?" "The truth," Lamont said, moving closer. "About you. About who you really are. Amir." The name hung in the air between them. Imani slowly stood up. "Are you crazy?" Her voice was calm, but fear flashed in her eyes. What Amir? Your brother disappeared 30 years ago. No. Lamont shook his head. He didn't disappear. He changed his gender and his name, and he wormed his way into my life, into my bed. Imani laughed, but the laughter sounded unnatural. Are you listening to an old man's ravings? Nzinga suffered from dementia in his last years. Everyone knew that. I checked. Lamont began laying documents on the table. The clinic in Chicago, the surgeon who operated on you, your medical records with characteristics that only transsexuals have. Even your favorite book is the same one Amir loved as a child. With each word, Imani's face changed. Fear gave way to anger, then despair, then some strange determination. So what if it's true? She suddenly asked in a completely different tone. Lower, firmer, a voice Lamont had never heard before. What if I really am your brother? What difference does it make? Lamont recoiled as if from a blow. Everything, he whispered. It changes everything. 25 years of marriage, 25 years of lies. Not lies, Imani objected, and her voice took on an intonation that Lamont remembered from childhood. Love. I loved you when I was Amir, and I continued to love you when I became Imani. Love? Lamont felt nausea rising in his throat. You call that love? Deceiving me, manipulating me, using me? I didn't use you. Imani stepped forward. I was a better wife to you than any real woman could have been. I gave birth to, well, I adopted children for you. I supported your career. I created the perfect home for you. And all this time you were laughing behind my back? Lamont felt himself shaking with rage. I can just imagine you telling Nzinga about your successful experiment, about how you fooled your own brother. No, never. Imani tried to take his hand, but Lamont pulled it away. Nzinga found out by accident many years ago, and he's been blackmailing me ever since. Where do you think he got the money for this house? For his travels? I paid him to keep quiet. This new information only intensified Lamont's rage. He grabbed a heavy paperweight from the table, an award from the Bar Association for outstanding achievements. You ruined my life, he hissed through clenched teeth. You turned it into a farce. Dad? Mom? What's going on? Javan and Nala stood in the office doorway, looking worried and confused. Nala was holding her phone as if she were about to call someone. Go away, Lamont croaked. This is none of your business. But we heard screaming. Javan stepped forward, placing himself between Lamont and Imani. What happened? Your mother, Lamont began and stopped. How could he explain this? How could he tell his children that the person they thought was their mother was actually their uncle who had changed gender, and that they had been adopted illegally, with all the documents forged? Imani took advantage of his confusion. Your father is not himself, she said in a trembling voice. He thinks that I am not who I say I am. What are you talking about, Mom? Nala moved closer, her face contorted with concern. It all happened so fast that later Lamont couldn't remember the exact sequence of events. He only remembered a flash of rage, a clouding in his eyes. The paperweight in his hand flew through the air and struck Imani in the temple. She fell without a sound. Javan rushed toward him, trying to knock the weapon out of his hand, but was struck in the throat. Nala screamed and backed toward the door, dialing something on her phone. Lamont caught up with her in the hallway. When the fog in his head cleared, he was standing in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the bodies of his family. Imani lay at the foot of the stairs, her eyes open and empty. Javan was by the fireplace, in an unnatural position. Nala was by the front door, her phone lying nearby, the screen shattered. Lamont sank into a chair, breathing heavily. His thoughts gradually returned, forming logical chains. He was a lawyer. He knew how the system worked, how evidence worked. The first thing to do was to create an alibi. The second was to stage another crime. Methodically, with cold calculation, he began to act. He wiped the paperweight clean of blood and fingerprints. He found a pair of gloves. He broke the glass in the back door. He took Imani's expensive jewelry out of the safe and scattered it on the floor, creating the impression of a hasty robbery. He checked every surface he could touch. When everything was ready, Lamont left through the back door, walked a few blocks to the car he had left behind, a precaution he was proud of, and drove to a bar on the other side of town. There he ordered a whiskey, exchanged a few words with the bartender, and left a generous tip. Witnesses who will confirm his presence. Returning home around midnight, he discovered the bodies and called the police. By that time, he had already thought through every detail of his version of events. He had been working late. Then he stopped for a drink. When he returned home, he found his family dead. An obvious robbery that had gone wrong. Detective Kyra Dambia was the first to arrive at the crime scene. Tall, thin, with short dreadlocks and a piercing gaze. She listened to Lamont's story without interrupting, taking notes in a small notebook. "A strange robbery, Mr. Saint," she said finally. "Usually thieves don't kill unless they're forced to, but here there's such thoroughness." "What do you mean?" Lamont sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, with a cup of hot tea brought by one of the officers. The perfect picture of a grief-stricken husband and father. All the victims were struck fatally, but there are no signs of a struggle. It's especially strange with your wife. The blow was delivered from above, with great force, as if the weapon was held by a tall person standing directly in front of her. Perhaps she knew the attacker, Lamont suggested. She led him into the house. Perhaps, the detective looked at him intently. "Do you have any enemies, Mr. Saint? Anyone who might wish harm upon your family?" Lamont shook his head. "I'm a lawyer, detective. Of course, not everyone is happy with the outcome of the cases I handle. But it's a big leap from professional animosity to triple murder." "Indeed," Kara made another note. "It's also strange that the back door was broken into, but there are no footprints on the ground beneath it, and the neighbors' surveillance cameras didn't capture anyone suspicious." "There aren't many cameras in our neighborhood," Lamont remarked. "We value our privacy." "Of course," the detective snapped her notebook shut. "Well, Mr. Saint, we'll need to talk more, but not today. You've been through a terrible tragedy. Get some rest. Officer Nzanzi will take you to a hotel. Your home is still a crime scene." Lamont nodded, feigning grief and exhaustion. But inside, he felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if the weight that had been pressing down on him for the last few days had disappeared. He was free from the lie he had been living for 25 years. As he got into the police car, he noticed Detective Dumbia looking closely at his hands. There were fresh abrasions on his knuckles, traces of his rage in the office by the lake. Lamont quickly hid his hands in his pockets, but he could tell from the detective's gaze that she had noticed, and she had drawn her conclusions. Detective Kyra Dumbia sat in her office, plastered with stickers and photographs. On the board in front of her were pictures from the crime scene, the Saint family, now frozen in time forever, Imani with a broken temple, Javan with a broken neck, Nala with multiple head injuries. Kyra rubbed her eyes. It was the third day of the investigation, and there were almost no leads. The official version, a robbery that went wrong, seemed more and more dubious with each new fact. "Coffee?" Her partner, Detective Elias Nkosi, appeared in the doorway with 2 cups. "Thanks." Kyra took one. "Anything on the surveillance cameras?" Elias shook his head. "Nothing. The neighbors on the west side are on vacation. Their cameras were turned off. The neighbors on the east side only pointed theirs at the driveway. Nothing suspicious within a 3-block radius." "Because there was no one else there," Kyra muttered. "He did it himself." "Saint?" Elias sat down on the edge of the table. "He has an ironclad alibi. The bartender and 3 patrons confirmed that he was at the Blue Oyster from 8 to 11 p.m. The medical examiner determined the time of death to be between 7 and 9. An alibi can be fabricated." Kara approached the board. "Look, he kills his family around 7, stages a robbery, goes to the bar, shows up there, returns home and discovers the bodies. Why would a successful lawyer kill his own family? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Kyra tapped the marker on Imani Saint's photo. Something happened. Something that changed his attitude toward his wife and children. She decided to start with the past. The Saint family seemed perfect. A successful lawyer, a stylish wife who was a stylist, and children who were top students. But every family has its skeletons in the closet. Kyra requested archival records, old-school documents, tax returns. She methodically pieced together the story of Lamont Saint, born in Evanston to a middle-class family. His mother died early, his father drank himself to death. His younger brother Amir disappeared at the age of 21 after a conflict with his father. Lamont graduated from law school, opened his own firm, and married Imani. But the deeper Kyra dug, the more questions arose. Imani Saint seemed to have appeared out of nowhere 27 years ago. Before meeting Lamont, there were no records of her, no school, medical, or tax records. Like a ghost, Kyra muttered, as she looked through another folder of documents. She decided to talk to Lamont's closest associates. The contact list included Barakat Mbenge, a partner at the law firm and a longtime friend. They met at a cafe near the Saint and Mbenge office. Barakat turned out to be a large man with an attentive gaze and a cautious manner of speaking. Lamont has always been a model of control, he said, stirring his tea. Meticulous down to the smallest detail. He never raised his voice. He always checked every document 3 times. And lately? Kyra asked. Have you noticed any changes in his behavior? Barakat thought for a moment. After Nzinga Oluwa's funeral, yes, he changed. He became distracted, irritable. He canceled meetings. I decided it was because of the death of a relative, but... The day before the tragedy, he called me. He asked about the laws governing identity change, fake documents. He said it was for a case, but he sounded strange, agitated. Did he mention his wife, his children? No, but... Barakat hesitated. He asked if children could inherit if they were adopted illegally, with forged documents. I thought it was for a client, but now... Kyra returned to the station with new questions. She requested a search warrant for the Saint's home, Lamont's office, and the entire family's bank accounts. The judge reluctantly agreed. After all, Lamont was a respected member of the legal community. Nothing significant was found in Lamont's office, but his bank accounts revealed an interesting picture. For the last 30 years, Lamont had been transferring large sums of money to Nzinga Oluwa's account every month. The payments only stopped when the old man died. What was he paying for? Kyra asked, looking at the statements. It looks like blackmail. At the Saint's house, the team of forensic experts continued their work. Kyra joined them, hoping to find something they had missed during their initial inspection. Everything in Lamont's office remained untouched. The heavy furniture, the bookshelves, the computer on the desk. Check all electronic devices, Kyra ordered. His computer, phone, tablets, and find me all his personal documents, diaries, letters, notes. In the bottom drawer of the desk, they found a crumpled envelope with a wax seal. Inside was a letter written in a shaky hand. Kyra scanned the lines and her eyebrows rose. Dear Lamont, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I will take many secrets with me, but there is one that I have no right to take. You deserve to know the truth. Your wife, Imani, is your brother Amir, who changed his gender 30 years ago. Kyra reread the letter 3 times, trying to make sense of the information. If it was true, then everything fell into place. Imani's strange past, Nzinga's payments, and Lamont's sudden change in behavior after the funeral. Call the morgue, she said to Elias. Have them re-examine Imani Saint's body. Look for signs of surgery, hormone therapy, anything that might indicate a transgender transition. The results came back the next day. The medical examiner confirmed that Imani Saint's body showed signs of sex reassignment surgery performed many years ago. Tests showed traces of long-term hormone therapy. So the letter was telling the truth, Kira said, looking at the report. Imani really was Amir, Lamont's brother. But that doesn't prove Lamont killed them, Elias pointed out. It just gives us a possible motive. We need physical evidence, Kara agreed. Check the murder weapon again. Forensic experts determined that all 3 victims had been killed with a heavy object with a sharp edge. Nothing like that was found at the crime scene, but based on the nature of the wounds, experts suggested it could have been a metal paperweight or statuette. Check Lamont's awards, Kara ordered. There must be something that matches the wounds. Lamont's office had a shelf displaying various awards from the Bar Association. One of them, a heavy metal paperweight in the shape of the scales of justice, was missing. In its place was only a dusty void. Found it, Kara said, pointing to the empty space. That's our murder weapon. Now we need to find it. They searched Lamont's house, office, and car. No luck. The paperweight had vanished. He's smart, Kara admitted. He got rid of the evidence. But he hadn't managed to erase all traces. Forensic scientists found microscopic metal particles stuck in Imani's wound. Analysis showed that the metal matched the alloy used to make the Law Association's awards. That's not enough for an arrest, said the prosecutor, after reviewing the evidence. It's all circumstantial. Any good lawyer will tear the case apart, and Saint is the best lawyer in the state. Give me one more day, Kara requested. I have an idea. She requested the traffic camera footage from the Lake Michigan area. Lamont admitted that he sometimes went there to think. If he got rid of the murder weapon, he could have thrown it into the water. The camera footage showed Lamont's car parked by the lake the day before the murder. He sat inside for almost an hour, then banged his fists on the steering wheel furiously. That's when he made his decision, Kara said, looking at the screen. That's the moment he decided to kill his family. Kara headed to the hotel where Lamont was temporarily staying. He welcomed her into his room, looking tired but calm. Did you find anything? He asked, pointing her to a chair. Yes, Kyra remained standing. I found Nzinga Oluva's letter, and I know the truth about Imani. Lamont's face remained impassive. I don't understand what you're talking about. I know that Imani was your brother Amir, who changed his gender, Kyra continued. I know that Nzinga blackmailed her with this information for years. I know that you found out the truth at the funeral and couldn't accept it. Fantastic theories, Lamont shook his head. Without proof. I have a medical report confirming that your wife was transgender. There are Nzinga's bank transfers. There is footage from the camera by the lake where you were furiously pounding the steering wheel. And there are microparticles of your paperweight in Imani's wound. Lamont was silent for a long time, then walked over to the window. Do you know what it's like to live a lie, detective? He finally asked. 25 years, a quarter of a century. All that time he was there, looking me in the eye, sharing my bed, raising children with me, and laughing at me. You don't know if he was laughing, Kara gently objected. Maybe he really loved you, in his own way. In his own way, Lamont smiled bitterly. He stole the life I could have had with a real woman. He stole the chance to have my own children. It was all a lie. And for that, you killed not only him, but the children too? Kara took a step forward. They weren't to blame for anything. They were part of the lie, Lamont replied without turning around. He chose them, adopted them secretly, forged documents. They called him Mom and me Dad, and it was all a show. But they truly loved you. Lamont finally turned around. His face was contorted with pain. I didn't want to kill them. Only him, her. I don't know what to call her. Amira, Imani, my wife, my brother. But the children came running when they heard the noise. Javon tried to protect her. Nala called the police. I lost control. Kyra carefully took out her handcuffs. Lamont Saint, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Imani Saint, Javon Saint, and Nala Saint. You have the right to remain silent. Lamont didn't resist. He seemed drained, having spoken aloud what had been tormenting him inside. As Kara fastened the handcuffs on his wrists, he said quietly, "You know what's the worst part? Part of me still loves her, even knowing the truth." Kyra led him out of the room under the gaze of journalists' cameras, who had already caught wind of the sensation. The story of a lawyer who killed his family after learning that his wife was actually his brother who had changed sex promised to be the main news story for weeks to come. Back at the station, Kyra sat down at her desk and began filling out the report. The case was solved, the killer had confessed, but she felt no satisfaction, only fatigue and a vague sense of incompleteness. On the wall hung a photo of the Saint family, Lamont, Imani, Javon, and Nala, smiling against the backdrop of the ocean. A happy family? Or a clever illusion? Where does the lie end and love begin? Kyra closed the case file. She didn't have the answer to that question,